Hi, everybody. Welcome back to App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and today Federico and I are going to begin a series of one-on-one interviews with developers as part of our Summer OS preview series. Today's episode and the entire summer preview series is brought to you by Concepts. And this episode is also sponsored this week by Memberful. Okay, let's dive in with our interview with Marcos Tanaka. Marcos, I think before we dig too deeply into the new APIs and things that are going to affect what you do as a developer this fall, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your apps because not all of our listeners might be familiar with them. Why don't you give us a quick rundown on what they are and what they do and kind of how you came about creating those apps?
Sure. So MusicHarbor is an app that I created to help people keep up on the music that their favorite artists release. So in the app you can import the list of artists that you have on your library, on your Apple Music library or your Spotify library, and you can follow them in the app, and the app will arrange a chronological order of the latest release of those artists. So you can always know when new music was released, and also you can see the upcoming releases too. And besides music, it also has a feed of the latest music videos they released as well. So the idea is an app that centralizes everything music related from your favorite artist in one place.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, I think of MusicHarbor a little bit like RSS for music releases. It's a place where I can go on a regular basis and see exactly what the music I care about that has been released. Is that a good description, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description. It's useful because before developing MusicHarbor, what I would do was to, from time to time, enter in the artist's profile on Apple Music to see what was released that I didn't heard on the radio or so on. So having one place where everything is gathered for me and is chronologically organized makes it a lot easier to find the music from the artists that I already know and love.
And Marcos, I wanted to ask you about your, obviously I'm a huge fan of MusicHarbor, but I also wanted to ask you about your other music app, which is MusicSmart. Now, MusicSmart is interesting because I feel like in the age of streaming, right, where everybody's just searching for a song they want to listen to or streaming a playlist, you know, they just put on some music in the background and they just go on about their day. But MusicSmart puts the focus on something that, at least for me, used to be a big deal like 15 or 20 years ago, which is music credits, right? So learning more about the people behind the music that you love. And I kind of wanted to understand, like, I have to assume that this was also important to you personally, right? As a music fan. How did you come up with the idea of, for MusicSmart?
Yeah, so this is always something that was interesting to me because, like you said, on this streaming base, we tend to just put the music on in the background and not really pay attention to it most of the time.
Yeah.
But when I listen to music, of course that I do that too. While I'm working, most of the time I have some music on the background. But I also like to just sit down and enjoy an album without doing anything else. Just sit and listen to the music. Sometimes I'm curious when I listen to some music that I like about who worked on that music, who produced it, or who write the lyrics, and so on. And it's interesting because on Apple Music and on Spotify, we have almost no details about this information. So it kind of came to me naturally, this idea of trying to develop an app to integrate these streaming services with some database that could have where I could find this information. So it's interesting to know who worked on the music, and also as a way to discover new music from the people that created this music that you like. So, for example, I'm constantly, when I'm listening to a song, I open MusicSmart to know, for example, who produced that song, and also to see other songs that that person worked on. So I think it's very useful for music discovery as well.
Yeah, exactly. This is like exactly what I do as well. Like when I just want to listen to an album and do nothing else, right? Just listen to some music and focus on that. I think it's fine to explore the people behind the music, see the producers, see who played, a particular instrument, and sort of make connections and discover more songs. But sort of from a technical perspective, so for context, for listeners who are not aware of MusicSmart, so you use it so you can either use the app. So you open the app and you connect your music library, and you can browse your music library inside of the application itself. Or you can use the share sheet, right? There's an extension that lets you view details for any song from Apple Music, I believe, from the Music app, not from Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. You need to be using the Music app and use the extension. And then you rely on a bunch of different web services to make all of this possible. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way that works is that when using Apple Music, you can use the Action extension, as you said. It also works with Spotify as well, but I haven't implemented this yet. So because when we are using the Music app, the Share extension receives the link to the music that the user are listening to. So with that link, I know all the information about that song, and using some pieces of the metadata, I start a bunch of network requests to search for databases that might have this credits information about that song. And then I gather everything and arrange them to show to the user in an organized way. This could also work with Spotify, but I haven't implemented it yet in the app. It's on my list of things to do for future releases.
Nice.
And the app also has a list of songs that it reads from the user's local music library. So it's also possible to open the app and search for a song there as well.
All right. That's exactly like what I love about the app. Like you can choose to, it's either your library or you can share anything else from Apple Music, even though it's not in your library, and you can use the extension.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Concepts. Sketch, note, and explore endless ideas with Concepts Infinite Canvas for iPad. Draw in designer Copic colors with liquid pens and brushes, and organize images, text, and sketches into visual mood boards. Used by creative professionals for visual thinking, note-taking, team communication, storyboarding, product design, and architecture planning, Concepts lets you sketch and share your ideas in the moment. Everything you draw in Concepts is flexible. Everything you draw in Concepts is a flexible, editable vector. Nudge and edit and reorganize your ideas with natural finger gestures. Drag and drop images and objects onto the canvas for fast ideation and reference, using layers and grid layouts to organize your work, mark up PDF documents, and apply real-world scale for professional design projects. Export and share standard, high-resolution, and vector file types for flexible work between teams and apps. Concepts' built-in presentation mode lets you connect with others for live sharing and graphic-based discussion. Whiteboard virtually with teams and clients using apps like Zoom, then instantly share your discussions. The app comes free as a basic sketching tool and with the ability to unlock 200-plus libraries of brushes, objects, and services via subscription or a one-time payment. To learn more about Concepts, visit their website today at concepts.app. App Stories listeners can get a 1-month extended free trial when you sign up for an annual subscription at concepts.app/MacStories. I'll have a link in the show notes. Again, to learn more, go to concepts.app. Our thanks to Concepts for their support of the show.
So, Marcos, I want to switch to the changes in iOS 15. So, I wanted to talk about MusicKit. Can you tell us and our listeners what's changing in MusicKit and what kind of features do you expect the changes will enable for your apps?
Sure. So this year we had two big news for developers that work with Apple Music. The first one is MusicKit, which is a new framework that they announced that kind of it's a layer on top of the Apple Music API. So the way apps that integrate with Apple Music work until now is they call the web service API manually. We have to define every endpoint that we want to call, and the parameters and the response and so on. But now with MusicKit, Apple has created this framework that encapsulates all this complexity and exposes easier to use APIs that we can use to integrate with the Apple Music service. And the other thing that they announced was changes to the Apple Music API itself. So since 2017, when the API was introduced, we never had any changes to the methods the API have. But now they announced a lot of changes and improvements to the existing methods to make another types of features possible. So for example, now we have the concept of record labels. We can search for record labels, we can get the list of the latest releases and so on. There's also a few other improvements in the API. For example, now we can easily find a corresponding resource by using an ID. So, for example, if I read some album in the user library, I can easily get the equivalent album in the Apple Music catalog and vice versa. And also a lot of other smaller improvements in search and in other methods of the API. Yeah, I think now we have a more complete access to the functionalities that Apple Music has. And for users that are starting to create an app that integrates with Apple Music, starting from iOS 15, they also have the ability to use MusicKit to make this integration even easier.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because I know, way back when I used to use the iTunes Search API for an app that I worked on, and that API is basically never changed, and you can still get music information from it. But can you give me an idea of how MusicKit, for instance, or the ability to hook into Apple Music has improved the situation for someone like you who's building your apps as compared to what maybe the iTunes Search API does? Because the iTunes Search API, which is also used for apps and all sorts of other things, is pretty basic stuff in terms of just returning back a dictionary of JSON values that define what the different metadata is for a particular piece of media. What's different about these modern APIs that you're using that make your app better?
Yeah, so I think what's easier is talking about MusicKit, for example, it's that we don't we have all the corresponding objects already defined. So for example, we don't have to manually decode the JSON object that the API is returning to us. We already have this encapsulated inside MusicKit. And what makes it even easier to use is because this new framework is built using the new Swift syntax for asynchronous operation. So, for example, this new MusicKit framework makes it easier for us. It's also that it is built using the new Swift syntax for asynchronous operations. So, when we want to get related objects from one entity, for example, if I want to get a list of artists, a list of albums from an artist, I can just call that using the new syntax, and the framework does the work it needs to do to get that list and return it through our app. So if you build an app using this new syntax, it's much easier to handle these asynchronous operations,
right,
in a way that the code is easier to read and to write.
Yeah, that sounds great, because I just know that, like, Federico and I have been working on with one of our developers an internal app that we have for tracking app updates, and one of the hardest things is dealing with all those requests for long lists of apps and getting them back and getting them loaded and doing that all in a way that works really quickly and smoothly. So I kind of wish Apple would do something similar for apps too, but I'm glad that it's there for music so far, at least.
Yeah, they seem to be integrating this new paradigm through a lot of the existing frameworks that they have. So I think once we can start using it on our production apps, it will be a lot more easier to integrate with these services.
Marcos, I want to ask you about the other sort of music-related framework in iOS 15, which is ShazamKit. So this is an interesting one because it allows third-party developers to take advantage of the audio recognition engine of Shazam. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you will be able to recognize music as well as, like, as a developer, you will be able to sort of provide your own audio catalog to ShazamKit and match sort of data from the microphone against that catalog. Have you looked into ShazamKit at all for your music apps? And sort of how do you expect this will be used by developers of music utilities like yourself?
Yeah, so I haven't looked into ShazamKit yet because I don't, at least for now, I don't see any feature that I could build for my apps using it. But I think it's great that Apple is providing this API for developers, because it makes this kind of task of recognizing the sounds a lot easier. So I bet a lot of third-party developers have some kind of feature that they could implement using this technology. And before Apple providing this framework, they would have to kind of build this model and these machine learning models by hand. But from what I saw from the sessions at WWDC, it seems that it's a very simple framework to use. You just provide your sound samples, and all the heavy lift process and recognize the patterns will be done by the framework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful. Monetize your passion with membership. Memberful allows you to build sustainable, recurring revenue. It's the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, used by the biggest creators on the web. Memberful has everything you need to run a membership program, including custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free trials, private podcasts, and tons more. On top of that, Memberful seamlessly integrates with the tools you already use. You have full control and ownership over your audience, your brand, and your membership. Memberful also has a world-class support team ready to help you to simplify your membership and grow your revenue. They're passionate about your success, and you'll always have access to a real human. With Memberful, you always have full control and ownership of your audience, your brand, and your membership. Payments go directly to you via your Stripe account. We've used Memberful for years for Club MacStories, and we absolutely love it. We have complete control over the relationship with our members. It makes payments super simple for customers, and it supports everything we've ever wanted to offer for club members, and a whole lot more. I can't think of any other service that could handle everything we do as well as Memberful does. Get started for free with no credit card required. Just go to memberful.com/appstories. Again, that URL to get started with no credit card is memberful.com/appstories. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show. Marcos, what? Let me ask you about shortcuts for the Mac, because I know that you've got implemented shortcuts actions in your apps. What do you think bringing that over to the Mac is going to do for developers like yourself?
Yeah, so I think this is probably the feature that I'm most excited about, because I do spend a lot of time on my Mac, uh, working on my apps and so on. So having the ability to use the shortcuts that I have on my phone and on my Mac will have a great impact on my day-to-day activities. So as a user, I'm very I'm looking forward to using this on my Mac, and I think that from a developer perspective, it's also great because, for instance, on MusicHarbor, the only part of the app that I can't bring to the Mac using Catalyst until now was shortcuts. And now that shortcuts are available on the Mac, I will be able to have a version of the app that has the same functionality that it has on the phone and on the tablet. So for developers, greater incentive to work on shortcuts, because it's one more platform that I can provide the shortcuts from the app.
Right. No, I think that's a great point, because not only are you able to deliver the shortcuts actions on all the platforms, but your users are already used to using that on the iPhone and the iPad, and now it gives them the added value of being able to use the app is a lot more the app is at parity on all the different platforms, which I think will make for a better experience for everybody who uses your apps, which is really great. I was wondering if there's any particular API besides the ones we've already talked about that you're really excited about for this fall, that you're digging into and think might have some impact on what you're working on these days.
I think this year we didn't had a lot of completely new APIs compared to last year with widgets, for example. That almost every app this year we have SharePlay that's similar in the sense that it is completely new API, but I don't think that all apps will be able to use it in a way that makes sense for the app. So what I'm most looking into this year, and what I was most glad to see, was the small improvements that Apple did on the frameworks that we use every day. For example, the improvements in Foundation with the new formatters and the support for Markdown in attributed strings and so on. And also the improvements we got in UIKit with the new button styles. And there's also great improvements that they are delivering for table views and collection views regarding to the scroll performance. And also with the expansion of Swift UI, because I think that this year the improvements in Swift UI with the new components that we got that we didn't have before. So I think we can start to integrate it even more in our apps, and also create new projects completely in Swift UI. Because, for example, in MusicSmart, that project, my idea was to develop it 100% in Swift UI, but at the time that I created it, a lot of basic components were missing from the framework. So I constantly had to fall back to UIKit to implement things in the way that I wanted them to look and behave. Now I think that if I was building an app from scratch today, I would be able to do most of it, if not all, 100% in Swift UI, which is great because using Swift UI makes it a lot easier to port this app to all Apple platforms. So for the iPhone, for the iPad, and also for the Mac. And I think on the Mac specifically, the components have a more native look and feel than what we get when we use Catalyst, for example.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a very important point because it's a theme that I've really seen developing over the last few years is Apple kind of moving away from developers being, iOS developers or Mac developers and really just being platform developers across all of the different devices that the company makes. And to make that really a reality, there are a lot of things that have to happen, and that's kind of what we've been seeing, I think, through things like Catalina and Big Sur on the Mac side, is making it a lot easier for people like yourself to bring those apps that have been successful on the iPhone and the iPad over to the Mac. And I think in the end, it's not only good for you, obviously, who is selling apps on those platforms, but also the users have a consistent experience across all these platforms. I have to laugh a little bit when you start explaining about table views and things. It's remarkable to me that table view performance has been an issue since day one with the iPhone. And it's one of those things that I don't know that people who use an iPhone necessarily understand the complexity of what's happening when they scroll through a long list of cells of data, whether it's addresses and phone numbers, or it's a list of albums and artists like in your app, or whatever it happens to be. But there's a lot that's going on, a lot of coordination happening behind the scenes to refresh all those cells, pull in the data, and get it all displayed quickly so that it looks like one endless list to the user, when in fact it's really nothing of the sort. And it is something that I think has set the iOS devices apart from the very beginning, is that even when we had the very first iPhone, the performance of those things was quite good compared to what might have been possible on other devices by other manufacturers at the time.
Yeah, and it's a component that's used by a lot of apps. I think that every improvement that they can do on them will be felt by almost every user of the platform, and especially for lists that have complex cells in them. For example, lists that shows images and this data that needs to be fetched, preferably before the user sees the cell, but in a way that doesn't consume a lot of memory as well. So there's a lot of things that happen under the hood for this to happen in the framework. There's also things that we as developers can do to improve this, and with the new improvements that they are bringing this year for collection views and for table views, we will gain a lot of the performance improvements for free on our apps. Combining that with the new APIs for resizing and rescaling images to be presented more performatically in the app, I think it will be easier than ever to deliver a great experience in lists across all Apple platforms.
Marcos, before we wrap up this interview, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you can share about what's coming next for MusicHarbor and MusicSmart?
Yeah, so this year, what I plan to do is to integrate these small improvements that we had with UIKit and SwiftUI on my apps. Try to use SwiftUI a lot more now that it has all these components that we didn't have before. And I also have a few plans of new features to implement in MusicSmart for the end of the year that I think will be a fun feature to implement and for users as well. And on MusicSmart, I'm thinking about how to improve even more the amount of information that we get for a song or for an album. One thing that I was thinking about lately was a way to link a specific album or a specific song to extra content, for example, podcast episodes or YouTube videos about that specific album, so that people can not only get the details of the credits of that music, but also get to know additional content from other content creators that were created about that specific album.
That sounds like a great feature. I think that would be a great way to explore not only the artist's content, but also lead you to new things that would help you learn more about it. Marcos, I want to really thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really interesting conversation. I love your apps. I'm so glad that you're continuing to improve them and make changes and push them forward, because MusicHarbor especially is one of those apps that I open up at least once every week towards the end of the week when new music releases are coming out, and it always feels like a little present to myself that I can find all those treats in one place and enjoy that music as I work throughout my day, and I really appreciate that sort of thing from you. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun.
All right, Federico, that's it for this week on App Stories. I want to thank Marcos Tanaka, the maker of MusicHarbor and MusicSmart, again for talking to us today. And thanks to our two sponsors, Concepts and Memberful. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net writing away. And of course, you can find Federico on Twitter and Instagram, where he is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.